America, land of the free, home of the brave. No country on earth can match her courage, spirit, and imagination. America's story is a restless tale of adventure, inspired by hard-won victories of the past and fueled by common hopes for the future. Through every chapter, America's greatest treasure has been her people. And with determination and skilled hands, each generation of American craftsmen has made its mark on history. It takes hard work to succeed. If we want to learn, history can be a great teacher that provides us with a blueprint to help us gain new skills and build for tomorrow.
Hello, and welcome to this National Roofing Contractors Association's program, Application of Single-Ply Membranes, another in the Roof Application Training Program series. Today, you're going to become familiar with the components and materials professional roof mechanics use for applying single-ply systems.
We'll explore the different kinds of membranes, discover basic application methods for these systems, and learn about important safety issues.
You'll also get an opportunity to practice these new skills in your in-shop and on-the-job training sessions. So, let's get started.
The pioneer spirit. It drove men and women across dangerous oceans to carve out lives in a hostile wilderness. But courage was not enough to tame this wild new world. Settlers needed houses and roofs that could withstand the freezing winters and burning summers of this tough country. The pioneers turned to the experts, craftsmen with the skills needed to build sturdy homes.
Sure, we live in modern times, but Mother Nature hasn't changed, and we still depend on a foundation of tried and true skills to install roof systems that will last. In part one of this video, we're going to look at a variety of single-ply membranes, their different characteristics, and some basic guidelines for their installation. Now, keeping in mind our motto, roofing is what we do, safely is how we do it, let's get started.
You should already know that a roof membrane is flexible or semi-flexible and helps waterproof a roof assembly. The introduction of single-ply membranes revolutionized the roofing industry. They are flexible, weather-resistant, and relatively easy to handle. Areas of a roof you should be familiar with are the field and flashing. The field is the main open area of a roof. Flashing areas seal roof systems at perimeters, penetrations, walls, valleys, drains, and other spots where the roof covering is interrupted or terminated. Flashings on these built-up and modified bitumen roof systems are fully adhered. Single-ply flashings, however, are not always fully adhered. Sometimes they are only partially adhered, or they can be installed with mechanical fasteners and not adhered at all. When installing single-ply systems, more than one type of adhesive may be used. For example, one type of adhesive may adhere the membrane to the substrate, another type might bond the seams, and a third may adhere the flashing to masonry or metal components. Now let's talk about some of the terms, calculations, and measurements used in single-ply systems. Generally, single-ply roof membranes range from 35 mils to 120 mils in thickness. The side lap is the overlap, lengthwise, of the material's edge. The end lap is the distance of overlap where one sheet extends past the end of the nearest underlying sheet. On center means spacing things apart equally and usually refers to fasteners. The perimeter is the distance all the way around something. Rate of coverage refers to the speed at which materials are applied to achieve the correct amount of coverage. A roof's slope or incline determines how good the drainage is on a roof. A single-ply membrane is made of rubber or plastic materials that are formed into a waterproofing sheet. There are 4 common single-ply membranes you need to know: CSPE or Hypalon, EPDM, PVC, and TPO. These membranes all have one thing in common: they are waterproof. You may work with other less common single-ply membranes. You can learn more about them in your student manual. Most single-ply membranes contain reinforcement. Some have a fleeced back that provides a surface that adheres to the substrate and adds reinforcing strength. Some membranes are made from pre-cleaned sheets, which saves time because you don't have to clean the seams yourself.
You should know a little about how single-ply membranes are made. There are 3 manufacturing methods:
Calendaring, extrusion, and spread coating. There's more information about these processes in your student workbook. There are 2 families of single-ply membranes: thermoset and thermoplastic. Thermoset membranes stiffen or cure during manufacturing. They cure more once they're set in place or heated. Thermoplastic membranes become soft when they are heated, harden when cooled, and can be reheated again. Products used with single-ply membranes are also considered a part of the roof system. Bonding adhesives, fasteners, membrane reinforcing and batten strips, splice cleaners, primers, and seam tapes. These preformed accessories are used for certain single-ply applications.
When it comes to single-ply membranes, specifications change from one type of membrane to another. Specs for the same type of membrane and system can also vary. Let's check out some of these differences.
A good sheet layout, for example, minimizes the amount of field seams and, at the same time, maximizes the roof system's attachment strength. There are different types of fastener systems and attachment patterns used for installing single-ply membranes. Seaming methods vary from one type of membrane to another. Use of adhesives differ too. Membranes are secured at perimeter edges and around penetrations with various reinforcing strips. Some specs allow for different ways to install water blocks and temporary tie-offs.
That brings us to the end of part 1. Let's quickly review what you've just learned.
You checked out single-ply membranes and saw how they are used as part of a roof system. You became familiar with the terms, calculations, and measurements used in single-ply membrane applications, and learned that the membranes themselves are manufactured in different ways. Finally, you learned that specs for single-ply applications can differ from job to job, and from one type of membrane to another.
When you get right down to it, there really isn't anything you can't do if you're willing to work hard and learn. Think of the early pioneers. They had to overcome many hardships to build their colonies, but they had solid skills to help them. Keep the basics in mind and practice each new skill so that you can master it. And before you know it, you'll have achieved each goal you set out to accomplish.
Niagara Falls, one of the great wonders of the world. Over 200 bone-crushing feet tall. Below lie the river and gorge, deadly rapids, treacherous rocks, and a final descent into a whirlpool. Who would even think about pulling a stunt here, right? Wrong. On June 30th, 1858, the Great Blondin successfully walked across Niagara Falls on a 3-inch diameter rope. Other daredevils followed, some attempting to ride over the enormous Horseshoe Falls in barrels and other homemade contraptions. Some made it, some didn't.
Americans have always been fascinated by daredevils. But being a daredevil is something you don't even want to think about up here. As a professional roof mechanic, not only are you responsible for your own safety, you have to watch out for your team as well. Besides, staying healthy on the job means you get to keep learning and earning. In part 2 of this video, we're going to review some basic safety tips that will help make single-ply installation safer and more efficient.
As you know, it's important to use and respect warning line systems. If anyone must work outside the warning line, they must be protected by a guardrail, wear a personal fall arrest system, or have a safety monitor on duty. Guardrails must be in place around openings and all material handling areas. Make sure you cover any penetrations in the roof deck, such as holes and skylight openings. And of course, when necessary, wear a personal fall arrest system. If you're not sure how to use one, review it with your supervisor. On a single-ply installation, Falling backwards while pulling out large sheets is a common hazard. So are falls caused by slipping on loose or wet sheets. Both types of falls can be easily avoided. As with any roofing work, always remember your personal protective equipment, PPE. Wear long pants without cuffs that cover the tops of your work boots. To help protect the single-ply membrane, your work boots should have smooth soles, not deep lugs, and be clean. Make sure you wear good work gloves, and don't forget your goggles or safety glasses when doing tasks that require them. And be aware that when single-ply membranes are wet or covered with frost, snow, or ice, they become very slippery. Early morning dew or frost can be especially deceiving. If you have these conditions, be careful that you don't slip and fall. Single-ply membranes are often white or very light in color, which creates a problem: intense glare from the sun. You may think it's great to get a tan, but the light color of single plies acts like a giant reflector, which means you're in danger of getting a severe sunburn. Always use sunblock on exposed skin, and wear sunglasses to protect your eyes. Also, keep your head covered. Try a lightweight hat. On a single-ply installation, hot air welders present a fire hazard and can cause burns. These tools create superheated air up to 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. This heated air is almost impossible to see, which makes working around it even more dangerous. Always keep the hot nozzle pointing up, away from the membrane surface, and away from yourself and coworkers. When you work with a hot air welder, wear leather gloves to avoid injury. On a single-ply installation, you will work around a lot of chemicals, such as seam cleaners, primers, and adhesives that can be absorbed through your skin or inhaled through your lungs and into your body. If you work with these chemicals, wear solvent-resistant gloves. If you are working in a poorly ventilated space, you may need to use a respirator. Be especially careful when you're installing single-ply sheets on a windy day. They can catch the wind like a sail and blow up, knocking you off your feet or off the roof. If necessary, use additional securement as the installation progresses. Single-ply rolls are often larger and heavier than other rolled materials. Always use safe lifting techniques when handling single-ply. If the load looks too heavy to lift, get help. Professional roof mechanics also use special equipment to move large bundles or rolls. When you want to hoist single-ply rolls, make sure slings and straps don't dig into the membrane. Use more than one single strap and add blocking or cribbing to cushion the rolls. Once the membrane has been hoisted, move it to the area where it will be used. Don't roll the membrane across a dirty, debris-covered surface. Make sure the area is clean and smooth so the membrane doesn't get punctured or damaged. Because single-ply rolls can be so heavy, they need to be spread out and located over load-bearing support areas of the roof deck. And you need to take precautions to protect yourself from back strain as well. Always practice safe lifting techniques, even when pulling heavy rolls around with a roll carrier.
You learned earlier how to protect yourself with proper PPE when using chemicals. Well, there are other hazards you need to be aware of when handling solvents, cleaners, or adhesives.
Most of these chemicals are highly flammable. Even the vapors can ignite or explode. Never smoke or use an open flame when these materials are around. And if spilled, these chemicals may damage a membrane. Always keep lids tight on the cans to hold down the vapors and help prevent spills. Also, don't allow cleaners or adhesives to freeze. Now let's talk about how to prepare for a single-ply installation. The first step is to make sure the substrate is smooth, clean, and dry. If your job is a recover, be aware that many single-ply membranes are not compatible with bituminous products, and the manufacturer may require additional materials to separate the new membrane from the old roof system. Check that all wood blocking, nailers, and penetrations are in place. Membrane should be installed as continuously as possible. This is an important part of the sheet layout. Understand your sheet layout before the job in order to minimize the amount of field seaming. This will help you maximize the strength of the roof system, improve the efficiency of your installation time, and keep the application as safe as possible. Earlier, we talked about side laps. Side laps are usually installed so water does not buck the seams. During the application, avoid phased construction. Instead, complete each area by the end of your workday. Membranes are installed to minimize foot traffic over new materials. When you're installing a single-ply membrane, make sure it's laid out smoothly without wrinkles or buckles. Some manufacturers recommend their membrane be rolled out and allowed to relax to relieve tension from being in a roll.
Well, that wraps up part 2. Before we move on, let's quickly look back at what we just covered.
You saw how important it is to set up fall protection and to always wear personal protective equipment, PPE. On a single-ply installation, additional PPE may be necessary to protect yourself from harsh sunlight and hazardous chemicals. You learned how professional roof mechanics protect single-ply rolls while hoisting them to a roof. You also saw how a sheet layout can help you install a single-ply membrane more efficiently.
You're doing a great job and adding important new skills to your knowledge base. So, join me in part 3, where we'll take a close look at single-ply application tools and equipment.
In a new land where people were putting down roots, raising roofs, and digging in to start families, they needed tools to help them complete the hard tasks that filled their days. Early settlers turned to the experts, like the local blacksmith, who could forge tough, dependable, specialized tools for all kinds of jobs. Working with the right tools and equipment is also critical for installing single-ply membranes.
In part 3 of this video, we're going to look at the tools and equipment you'll need for single-ply application. Now, some of these you'll recognize and some you won't, but don't worry. You'll get a chance to become familiar with them during your in-shop and on-the-job training exercises.
Let's start with your personal toolkit. As always, keep all tools and equipment in good working condition. You'll use these large shears and this utility knife with a hooked blade to cut membrane. This tape measure runs up to 25 feet. Use this chalk line to snap and mark a line. A caulking gun is used to apply sealant. This steel hand roller is used for rolling seams, and so is this rubber-coated roller. You'll use this rubber type more often because it's less likely to damage the membrane.
Now let's check out some powered seaming tools, which are used for many thermoplastic single-ply installations.
Be very careful when you handle this hot air welder. These knobs activate and control the hot air flow. You'll also use automatic hot air welders that have rubber-coated wheels, drive speed controls, and stand-up handles for faster welding at proper temperatures. Powered screw guns are used to install many kinds of mechanical fasteners used for single-ply applications. You'll use this handheld model to install fasteners around penetrations and around perimeter edges. And stand-up models are used for installing fasteners in the field. Carefully follow safety precautions when you use any power tool. Make sure you understand how to use these tools safely. You can check the owner's manual for proper use and maintenance instructions, or ask your supervisor. Never carry a tool by its cord. Always wear eye and hand protection when required. And make sure your power source for electrically powered equipment has a ground fault circuit interrupter, or GFCI. A GFCI will protect you from electric shock. Never touch the welder except at the handle, and if the welder itself or any other power tool sometimes runs and sometimes doesn't, don't use them. They're faulty, potentially dangerous, and should be repaired or replaced. Now let's look at moving heavy rolls of single ply safely. Cranes are used to hoist large rolls. Anyone operating a crane must be properly trained, and you should be familiar with how to set straps and rigging for these loads. All straps and rigging should be inspected before any load is lifted. Slings, chains, and ropes should be free of kinks. One of the easiest ways to move single-ply rolls is with this dolly-type roll carrier. Adhesive spreaders are important equipment for single-ply installation. Pressurized rollers, adhesive sprayers, drum-type spreaders, squeegees, and rollers are all used to apply adhesive during installation. Again, think about safety. Protect yourself with proper PPE when you work with these chemicals. To move and spread ballast, like this rock aggregate, use wheelbarrows, rakes, and shovels. Professional roof mechanics also use hand-pushed aggregate spreaders and powered carts for larger installations. Caulking guns are used to apply sealant. There are also electric-powered caulking guns that make caulking a little easier. You'll also see one of these on a single-ply installation. This type of roller removes trapped air and smooths out the membrane without damaging it. You'll also use these other tools for seaming membranes: solvent-resistant marking crayons, dusting and cleaning rags, abrasive pads for scrubbing seams, small rollers, and solvent-resistant paintbrushes. Finally, these seam probes are used to check the tightness of the seam bond.
We've reached the end of part 3. So let's quickly recap what you've just learned and then move on.
You checked out the tools that make up your personal toolkit. And you learned about powered seaming tools. You saw how important it is to be careful when handling any electrically powered tools and equipment, and looked at devices that make tasks such as spreading adhesives and aggregate easier and more efficient. You also learned about some smaller tools that professional roof mechanics depend on daily.
Keep up the good work, and join me in part 4. We'll check out different application methods for single-ply installation.
Breaking broncs, roping calves, and most dangerous of all, bull riding. Welcome to the rodeo, the only American sport that grew out of skills used for everyday work, and it's been that way for generations. Endless practice, plenty of spills, and the thrill of competing to be the best.
Still, a ride on one of those sure makes 8 seconds feel like forever. To succeed, a professional roof mechanic also must be committed to learning. Not only that, he must practice what he learns every day in order to build a career that lasts. In part 4 of this program, we're going to learn the basics of applying different single-ply systems. Let's begin.
There are 3 installation methods for single-ply roof systems: loose-laid ballasted, mechanically attached, and fully adhered. Let's look at a loose-laid ballasted system first. Single-ply membrane sheets are often made in large rolls, sometimes as big as 50 feet by 200 feet. These rolls are very heavy, but minimize the amount of field seaming you or your crew will have to do. The sheets may be reinforced or non-reinforced. Each sheet is unrolled, pulled out, and set smooth and straight. The side laps are aligned and then marked. On windy days, temporary weight may have to be spread over the membrane to hold it in place until the final ballast materials can be laid down. The membrane gets mechanically attached at perimeter edges and around penetrations. Then the field seaming is completed. Flashing is applied as the installation of the membrane progresses. Next, the ballast is spread continuously over the entire surface. Generally, large round river gravel or crushed rock is used. Concrete pavers may also make up the ballast. Don't worry about learning all this now. You will get detailed installation instructions in a later program. Let's move on to protected membrane systems. A protected membrane application is a variation of the loose-laid ballasted system. It also depends on a heavy surfacing and the force of gravity to hold the membrane and insulation in place. Often, a single-ply membrane is loose-laid directly over the structural roof deck. The sheets are laid out smoothly and mechanically attached at all perimeter edges and penetrations. Then, the field seaming is completed. The flashing is applied as the membrane is installed. The system specs may call for a protective mat or fabric material to assist drainage. Now, insulation is laid loose over the membrane. Some specs may also call for a filtering fabric to be loose laid over the top of the insulation. This fabric prevents dirt, sand, or other fine particles of debris from washing down onto the membrane. Next, the ballast is spread continuously over the surface. The heavy ballast uses the force of gravity to hold the roof system in place. Again, aggregate or concrete pavers are used as ballast. A protected membrane system has an advantage over other systems. It offers the membrane greater protection from foot traffic, extreme weather, and damage from powerful UV sun rays. Membrane sheets that are mechanically attached are generally smaller in size, about 6 to 10 feet in width and 50 feet in length. As the sheets are rolled out, they are mechanically attached along the side lap edges. The fasteners are then covered by the overlapping sheet, and the seam is sealed over the fasteners. The membrane is also mechanically attached at all perimeter edges and penetrations. As the membrane is installed, the flashing is completed.
Now, let's look at a fully adhered system.
Rolls of membrane that are fully adhered are also smaller, generally about 10 feet wide by 50 feet long. The sheets are rolled out smoothly and their side laps aligned for proper seam overlap. The membrane is then fully adhered to the substrate using a special bonding adhesive that is generally applied to both the membrane and the substrate. Sometimes a sprayed foam type adhesive is used. The membrane is mechanically attached at all perimeter edges and penetrations. Flashing is completed as the membrane is installed. And finally, the lapped seams are sealed.
Well, we've reached the end of part 4. Before we move on, let's quickly review what we've learned.
You looked at 3 methods for installing single-ply membranes. Loose laid ballasted, which uses the force of gravity to hold the roof system in place, including the protected membrane system. Remember, a protected membrane system has the added advantage of offering extra protection from foot traffic, harsh weather, and sun damage. Mechanically attached systems use smaller membrane rolls fastened directly to the substrate, and a fully adhered system bonds the membrane directly to the substrate.
This seems like a lot to remember, doesn't it? Well, you're doing a great job, so stick with it and join me in part 5 for step-by-step application instructions for single-ply membranes.
Sometimes a small invention starts a revolution that changes everything. In America, we've had quite a few revolutions. The first electric light bulb, the early telephone, even the first toaster may not have seemed like much at the time, but once people got used to them, they would never go back to doing things the old way. The introduction of single ply was a revolution too, because it changed the roofing industry and the way we work today. Single-ply components are produced in a factory and then assembled at a job site. It's faster, cleaner, and can be secured to a substrate with different application methods.
And that's what part 5 of this program is all about. The different application skills you'll need for single-ply installation. You ready? Let's go.
Let's begin with hot air seam welding techniques. First, turn on the heat gun and adjust it to the right temperature. Insert the hot air welder's nozzle between the seam layers. Direct the heat to the innermost part of the seam. As the material heats up, begin rolling the hand roller, working the seam from the innermost part to its outer edge. Move the heat gun continually. Leaving it in one spot too long could burn the material. Continue rolling and heating in the same direction. For automatic hot air welders, first turn on the welder, insert the nozzle into the seam, and test run for a short distance. Then adjust the heat and tracking speed as necessary. After welding the seam, check your work with the seam probe. If you find any loose areas, fix them by reheating with a handgun to seal it. If that doesn't work, you'll have to weld a patch over the defective area. You'll also use adhesive or tape-bonded seaming techniques. First, prepare the seam by marking the edge of the overlap and folding the top layer of the membrane back along the marked line. Your goal is to fold the membrane back just far enough to expose the underside of the top layer. Some membranes are pre-cleaned. If yours is not, clean both sides of the seam with a splice wash seam cleaner. The splice adhesive is then applied with a small paintbrush or roller to both sides of the seam and allowed to dry until tacky to the touch. Next, your specifications may call for the application of an inseam sealant. The seam is then set and pressed with a hand roller. Roll out any wrinkles and fish mouths perpendicular to the seam. Seam tape is the most common method used to bond seams for EPDM membrane. Here's how to do it. After the seams are aligned, mark the membrane along the edge of each seam and fold the adjoining sheet back. On windy days, use small dabs of splice adhesive to hold the sheet back. If your sheet is not pre-cleaned, you'll need to clean it. A splice wash primer is then typically applied. Set and align the tape along the seam, leaving approximately 1/4 inch exposed beyond the marked edge. Roll out, set, and align the tape along the seam. Remember to maintain the tape's 1/4 inch exposure. After all the tape is set on the seam, pull loose and flop the top membrane into place. Now, peel the backer off following the entire length of the seam. Using a hand roller, roll perpendicular to the seam to bond it.
Have you ever wrapped a present for someone? When you cut the wrapping paper, you have to keep it taut. Same goes for most single-ply membrane.
Pull the membrane taut and cut it with large shears or a hook-bladed utility knife. When you need to get a membrane around pipe and other penetrations, cut the membrane so it fits around these obstacles. Here's how to do it. Place the membrane over the pipe penetration and press down to make an impression of the pipe's outline on the membrane. Cut the hole about 1/2 inch smaller than the outside of the pipe and force the membrane down. You should see a small lip of membrane turned up around the pipe.
Well, that brings us to the end of this program. We've covered a lot of material, so let's take a moment and review.
In Part 1, you learned about 4 common types of single-ply membranes, how they are made, and their strengths as roof coverings. In Part 2, you took a close look at how to work safely with single plies, how to handle and move single plies, hazards to watch out for on the roof, and of course, always wearing the proper personal protective equipment, your PPE. In Part 3, you became familiar with the tools and equipment you'll need for installing single ply. Make sure you follow all safety precautions when you use electrically powered tools and equipment. Also, be extremely careful around equipment used for moving large bundles of membrane. Cranes should be operated by qualified people only. In Part 4, you learned about the 3 application methods for single ply: loose laid ballasted, including protected membrane systems, mechanically attached, and fully adhered. In Part 5, you learned some of the basic skills required for applying single-ply membranes, including hot air welding and adhesive and tape-bonded seaming methods. You also saw ways to cut membranes and fit them around penetrations. America, her greatest treasure, her people. From every walk of life, through difficult challenges, Americans have joined together and worked to create a common destiny.
We're all part of the American story. Whatever our goals may be, our history shows us that anything is possible. Think about it. With hard work, determination, and most of all, a willingness to work together as a team, you can enjoy your own history of success.